3, 2, 1.
Acting in Los Angeles right now as an art major, as an artist.
I'm here in Brixton in London in the studio of Lucie Conoley, and Lucie, my very first question for you is, what was modernism?
Okay, Kit. So modernism, as I understand it, in my very basic understanding, would be, it was a sort of response to society around this time. You know, with things like industry moving forward, huge changes in architecture. Our world was changing quite rapidly, and it was sort of our response to this. I feel like it was, you know, like loads of aspects of our world are being quite radically revised, like nature and science, and so we were like in art, when you think about it from art, like we were sort of moving away from the sort of mystical, and we were moving into the factual. And you know, modernism was, you know, sort of showing progression in everything, and you know, when you look at it in art, artists were, it was more like a sort of sensory response as opposed to a figurative one, and I guess that for me is how I feel about modernism.
One of the reasons I was interested in talking to you about your work today was that you do maps of, particularly of London and particularly of the area that we're in here in Brixton.
Yes.
How long have you been doing these maps?
So I started doing it part-time when I worked at a photography studio, and I knew I liked to draw. So one day I went with my boss and we were deciding what I could draw this time, and she was like, you know what, she's like, why don't you do a map of our area? And I was like, that's a great idea. So I did one, and my other boss's wife, she saw it and she commissioned a big painting for her kitchen. So and then from that I just got more commissions, so I started doing it part-time. So that was probably about maybe like 3 years ago, and then last year I was able to like quit my job and go at it full-time.
That is quite amazing to in such a short space of time to.
It's, do you know, it's been absolutely, I think that like what I feed off, and I think people get this from me, is that like I love how much people love their areas. People are so passionate about where they're from, and you know, that for me is the enjoyment of doing them, is sort of, you know, getting to hear their stories, why a certain thing is special to somebody, and yeah, just that for me is the pleasure of it. Because
they're not just renderings, you know, graphic renderings of the city. They are in fact you call them the MIPs.
MIPs, yeah.
Which stands for?
The most important places.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, they, in each person's world, you know, like, to sound corny, I don't mean to, but they, I sort of feel like they are literally maps of a lifetime, in the sense that, I'm so sorry, I know that sounds really corny, but I just mean they're like your life in a map. So, you know, because everything can go in there, you know. I had one guy who had a beached whale as a golf target, so you know, anything goes. So yeah, it's you know, it's, you can, the more personal bits the better.
So each individual map is actually about that person's, you know, the ones that are commissioned individually.
So the individual commissions, the more, you know, generic ones, like, you know, this big thing behind me, this is more like a sort of generic thing, and doesn't really have any personal bits in there. But when I'm doing the generic ones, that I'll then research the area's history, so then all the little details become, you know, like local legends and local history and stuff like that. So that's where all the little personal bits come from in those ones.
Do most of these tend to be London?
Do you know what? No, not really. I have done quite a few London ones.
Yeah.
But I've, you know, done like loads of places. I think the most random, like the most sort of bizarre I did was Chamonix, because it was quite, you know, not very, you know, it's just land basically, and that was quite interesting to do, because it was sort of like, well, how do I sort of bulk it out with, little bits and stuff. But yeah.
And had you been there?
No. Most of the places, I haven't been to most of the places.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to Marrakesh at the end of the month to do the main square there. So that's going to be the first time that I actually map a place that I'm actually going to. So yeah, that's very exciting.
Wow! So that is actually a research trip to Marrakesh.
Yeah. It's this guy. I think basically it's something with their religion, you can't photograph there, so it's not really on. There's not really much research online. So he was like, well, we'll just have to get you out here, and I was like, well, yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. So yeah, very exciting. So yeah.
Now the way that you work, when I initially saw your work, I thought that it must be done on computer because it's very graphic. It's monochromatic, often blue, red, black and white.
Yeah.
But you actually, it's surprising when I've come here to see that you actually work on canvas.
Oh yeah, like this is how it started. I was doing probably all of last year I was just doing canvases. It was only this year when I had a show in Brixton Village that I was like, no one's going to buy a canvas, so I need to do sort of prints. So that's when I started doing the more graphic-y things. And so yeah, I mean this is and this is what I love doing. This is the exciting bit.
And how long would a canvas of this size, which is probably about 2 meters?
This is 7 foot by 4 foot, I think it is. So I've allowed for two months, and that's with all research and everything and stuff. But yeah, I mean probably 6 weeks maybe. Yeah, that's I do the plans first, and then crack on with painting.
They seem incredibly work intensive.
Yeah, it's so weird because my character, as has probably come across quite well here, quite all over the place. I'm not, a bit sort of, for want of a better word, kind of scatty, and for some reason I find it really easy, and I really enjoy just sitting here till 2 in the morning and just drawing little houses. And it's so not quite in keeping with my character, but yeah, I love it.
Is it kind of like a meditative?
Maybe that's, yeah, do you know, maybe it is. I mean, I get my Radio 4 ghost stories on. I've got Oscar here, and then just completely zone out, and the days just go. Here till about sort of 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm doing a big canvas like this, and that's just normal, and it's nice, and yeah, it is quite bizarre, although it does get cold up here in the winter, so I had to have gloves on, which then that gets a bit annoying, but no, apart from that I can sort of be up here till 2 in the morning quite happily.
You plan these out quite meticulously.
Yeah.
And then you transfer them to the canvas.
Yeah.
So is the process of transferring them to the canvas just a very straightforward one, or does it change within that?
No, do you know what? I always think it's going to be easier, but it never is.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can tell, this is obviously the dimensions of that are not in sync with this. So I mean that was actually a plan for this map behind me, this big one, but actually just by complete coincidence this one I'm doing is also of sort of the middle section of that, so that plan has worked out perfectly. So yeah, it's definitely, I think it's just getting the road plan right first of all, and then once that's right, then everything else just falls into place. That's the annoying part, just doing the roads.
And are they, if you overlaid it on a map, on a road map, I gather it wouldn't accurately sort of sit on top. It's much more.
No, well, do you know what, the painting ones not so much, but the graphic ones.
Yeah.
I mean, those are so with the Brixton, I mean, you pretty much got all the Brixton roads there, and you could sort of navigate Brixton with that map. And actually, sometimes I've done quite a few of Balham, and I know Balham so well now. And I hardly ever go there, but whenever I'm there, I'm just like, I know exactly where I am. I've joined it so many
You
times.
could know the entire country by the end of
That
it.
is my goal. In the end, ultimately.
You talked a bit earlier about how you started to do maps, but how did you get into thinking about urban spaces? Because to me, thinking of modernism and modernity, the city is really the manifestation of modernity, and what you do in your work is kind of bring in the psychological and emotional element of that. Okay. Tell me how you moved into developing that part of it.
Because I was quite interested to hear, how you were sort of marrying the two, because I'm quite interested to hear that. That I sort of feel like for me, I've always been interested in drawing buildings. I love drawing buildings, but I like I don't know, if you can rate this modernism or not, but sort of taking a building and not drawing it figuratively. I'm actually just doing a representation of it in its simplest form, that it's still recognisable, and like you can tell sort of this is Canary Wharf here, and it's very basic, but still recognisable. Is that sort of what you mean? Or
I mean, I suppose when you're doing maps of people's most important places, you're not just figuring it as a physical space out there, but more of a kind of an emotional space, isn't it? Or psychological space. Which is why they're individualised. Yeah. So how did you go from doing something, for instance, the one behind you is a very straightforward kind of map of London that's very much in your style. Yeah. But how did you move from that to the more specific type of maps, which are much more personal and emotional? And
okay. As in, like, did I start? Because I started doing those first.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
So that.
So it's in fact these more generic ones are much later.
The MIPs, the actual, the personalised ones. Yeah. They were the beginning. It's only as time has gone on that it's sort of progressed into the more sort of generic ones. And actually, I was actually talking with my husband about this quite recently, that it's quite weird because I have actually lost some of that emotional connection with doing these ones, because and it is really strange actually, because when I first started doing them, I've had like loads of poems in them, and everything was really personalised, and but it is actually moving away from that. But I just think that's because as it's gone on and it's actually become my job, that it's just transpired that I've actually got work where that isn't quite as, I'm doing more call for the more sort of generic ones, but I still do quite a lot of the small personal ones, but they just these ones are taking over a bit now.
The one that's behind you on your ceiling, you were telling me before, is actually a copy of one that was at Canary Wharf? Yeah,
no, this is the this is a small section of it. The original is like 8 meters long, but this was actually a misprint. So they were like, do you want to keep this? And I was like, yes, please, that would be great. So it's this sort of digital wallpaper photo text, and it's great fun. It's very sticky. It's lots of fun.
That must have been very difficult, actually, rolling that out onto the.
Like an idiot though, I peeled all the paper off, and then I went for it. So that was, I mean, like I said, not incredibly logical. Yes.
Now tell me how. From leaving school, what was the path that your education took that actually led you then to this career?
So I did a foundation level, because if you want to do a degree in England you have to do the foundation course. So I did a graphic foundation in London, and then through that I did visual communications, which is illustration, animation, photography and film. I specialised in photography, which is quite I couldn't believe it. I went to university thinking I was going to do illustration. I did quite a lot of illustration and graphics, but mainly did photography. So when I left, I got a job in a photography studio, and yeah, at this point I wanted to be a set designer. I mean, I always wanted to be a set designer when I was little, and it was great being there because I could sort of be a part of making the sets, and you know, I was there for a few years and it was loads of fun. But yeah, just quite an organic process in the sense that I just started doing, you know, drawing because I just knew I liked to draw, and so yeah, and then did a map one day, and then this.
I can see the development actually, even though it's not really obvious, but you can see the development here from set design.
Oh really?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, when I look at, for instance, you know, that section that you got of Canary Wharf up there with the row of buildings.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a kind of a sense of you know, a backdrop to a set done in miniature there.
Yeah. No.
So maybe.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, I like that. that's great to hear. Yeah, that was. I mean, I loved making, you know, just little rooms, little worlds. I mean, I would never sort of make that connection, but that's good to know. I'm quite pleased that comes across. When I was at the photography studio, what I wanted to do is, with my friend, start a business where you would go to like a party and we would make like a little mini set for you to come and have a photograph taken in. But you know, that just didn't happen at all. Yeah, it's definitely a passion.
Yeah, I think what it is, it's sort of capturing and processing or thinking about a larger physical space in a controllable miniature.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think that's when you know, I'm just looking up at the one behind you, and I can see like the gherkin and the the shard is in there, and you know.
Tucked away in the corner. Yeah, I mean.
It's like the vastness of London brought into a scale which is kind of manageable and iconic. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, that I hope this comes across when people see it, is like, I like the fun of being able to sort of like go through. It feels like a bit of a game to me, that you sort of like look through and like, oh, I can see, and you know, and then you start to go into it and stuff. And yeah, I sort of say they're sort of like a Where's Wally, only you're looking for not Wally, just loads of buildings.
Yeah, the Millennium Dome, for instance.
Yes, over there in the corner. I should put a Where's Wally in one of them. So
How did you do? Because you have a very particular style. How did you develop that style?
Well, sort of go back to what I was saying before, in the sense that I don't know how I developed it as such, but I know what I like to sort of just to sort of break it down into its sort of most simple components, but just so it's still recognisable. Like, I mean, you can't actually see St Paul's here; it's chopped off on the other bit. But
yes.
Oh, is
off
it?
The end, yeah.
Yeah, just yeah. Obviously, that is not an incredibly detailed drawing of St Paul's, but I hope people can look at that and still recognise it, and that's just, you know, how I like drawing, just sort of simplest, which is weird, because when I first started art school and stuff, I wasn't like that at all. I was like really like quite sort of messy and, you know, a bit all over the place and stuff, and I just got a bit more controlled.
To what extent is the production of the work, the actual process of working on it, part of the thinking process for you?
I guess that's quite a hard question for me, really, because it's like I'm sort of taking what's there and transferring it. So I guess for me it's like the execution, like the the whole thought process and the execution, like they kind of run parallel, if that makes sense. In terms of I don't really stray far from what I'm setting out to do, because it's sort of there for me to just take. And does that make, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's based on a physical
yeah
space,
exactly.
yeah. It's more determined by that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but I mean, I in this, with on the emotional side of the thought process, I think also because I stare at them for so long, then I hate every single one. Like, you know, and you know, so from that angle, I go through phases of this. You know, I think that the scale is, you know, paramount. Like that's you know, the most important thing. So when I have been, like, when I'm going through the process, and if I sort of step back and then I'll really start to assess the scale of everything, and if I've got it completely wrong, then that's when I'll literally just wipe it all and redo it again, and that's a whole heartbreaking process. But I don't really know if that relates to your question, really.
But because of the graphic style of it, if you do get to that point and you go, this is wrong, do you have to start again?
Yeah, oh yeah, I don't start again. I'll roll out that section, and
Yeah.
I have no qualms about doing that, because like that would just drive me crazy. Like, if, you know, if I finished it and, you know, this was all out of scale, you know, this building is this, and I think I'd probably do that on most canvases, like end up just wiping a whole load off, starting again. And then,
What are you painting it with? Is it acrylic?
Acrylic, yeah.
Because that dries very quickly, so you don't really have much time to.
I know. I just sort of sand it off a little bit and then paint over, and yeah. And the thing is, I had to do it, like, you know, if I see it and I'm like, oh, I had to paint it over straight away, because else if I just I'm an hour about it, and then if I don't change it at the end, I'll then really hate it. Then I always change it, but I just need to do it there and then get it off.
Do you ever come back to it and something that you've been satisfied with, you go, oh, you know, after you've spent a bit of time away from it?
Yeah, all the time. And, you know, like, I mean, I guess that works both ways, because sometimes, you know, you can look at it and say, oh God, awful, go away, and come back and be like, oh, I don't know what happened here, I must have had my negative eyes on that day. But then on the other side, oh, that, you know, vice versa. So yeah, swings and roundabouts.
And where do you see, because if you've been doing this for 3 years now, so where do you see this potentially developing?
So I am basically, the next thing for me and my goal is to get it onto crockery. So I got some samples, these are samples, but very basic samples. And I found a lovely man in Cardiff, a potter, and he makes this amazing, like all these ceramics here, like this jug here, really quite angular. So I'm sort of getting it onto that, really. That's where I'm going, although I'm having to measure out everything to make the transfers, which for me is a nightmare because I'm not very mathematical, so having trouble.
And are you having to then think, I suppose, of, you know, these 3D objects and how the maps work on them too?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's quite difficult, because it's like, what I'm quickly realising is how, you know, the slightest sort of change in the ceramic, it can totally distorts the image. So this is why it's been a bit of a whole learning process. But we finally got this pottery now, me and this guy, and he makes it, and it's very straight, so that sort of transfers really well because the image doesn't distort, but it's just about measuring the templates. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Wow. So, and that is going to happen with the...
Oh yeah, it's gonna. That's what this is my sort of side project that, you know, I'm definitely gonna do it. It's just, you know, hopefully it will work, and you know, who knows. But yeah, that's my next step as well. I wanted to do it on umbrellas, on the inside of umbrellas. And I've just seen there's a whole company that does that now. So I was like, oh no, that would have been...
Why the inside?
I just thought it was a nice concept, like, you know, sort of black on the outside, map it on the inside. And it's actually it wasn't my idea.
That's true, because if you have an umbrella that has something really nice printed on it, you don't get to see if it's on the outside.
I know, exactly. And you know, if it's a map, you can just be like, oh, where am I? It was actually this I met this girl, and she was like, oh, this is a really great idea, and I was like, that is a great idea, fantastic. But actually now there's a company who that's all they specialise in. So yeah, but they're really nice umbrellas. One day maybe, but yeah, for now the crockery is in the future.
Do you think you'll stick to maps as well?
Oh yeah. I love it. You know, I mean, I love maps in a sense of they're like, you know, like visual information. And so yeah, I mean, I can't really see myself sort of straying from it. And you know, plus, you know, the whole concept behind it, you know, meeting people and, you know, just getting to sort of hear their stories about where they live, like that, because I love where I live, and I really feel like, you know, I get that from other people, like, you know, when they're telling me their stories. So yeah, I just, you know, don't really want to move away from that at all.